Here we go. Good morning. This video is going to just simply be references, useful little tools that you can create or just literally find around the house and use that help you in your decoy process. One of the first things I did was, I was always having a problem when I painted with these tubes of paint, or I'd say bottles of paint actually. I was always knocking them over or having trouble painting with them because they'd spill on the desk and the table. So I created this little block, simply a block of wood, and I drilled holes in there with what's known as a Forstner bit, which is a bit that looks something like this. It's a big heavy bit that just goes right straight down in there when you're drilling them out. Makes it easy to create those holes. So what I've done is I've actually created a holder for my paints. And this one here just holds my basic paints, my tan, my dark brown, black and white, yellow, blue, gray, colors that are basically used on your decoys. I also made another block that has smaller holes in it that will accommodate actually the smaller containers where when I mix paints and I want to save it, I use these are 35 millimeter canisters. You can go to a photography store that does processing and ask them. They'll always have a ton of these that they literally just throw away. If you don't find that to be working for you, you can always go to the hobby store and just buy containers. They got small little ones like this. They've got empty bottles that you actually see here where the paint is in. And you can even buy some of those bottles with a stopper in them, so you don't have to go out and buy it. You just got your regular dipper right there. So those are just interesting little points, and they help because when I paint, I like to paint out of the cap. So what I'll do is I'll take little plastic containers, which you go to the food store, you buy something, they give you a little container of salad or whatever, and little snack trays like this that hold like nuts and cheese. And this is a 2-compartment deal. These are handy because when I like to paint, if I'm just going to be working on one color basically, I'll fill one side with water and I'll fill the other side with the paint. And usually it's just the paint that I shake up like this, open it up, and lay that cap right on the other side. So now I got my water, I got my paint. I'm not going to get it to spill or knock it over because it's in a tray. If I need to do a little bigger amount of paint, I just literally put the paint right in the other side, or I take a solid container like this and put one of these also little like applesauce containers and put that in there with my paint. So I've solved that problem. I don't have any problem with doing that. Another thing that I do that I found was very useful was I like to paint and coat my own eyes. So I buy a lot of clear eyes, and I always buy them with little stems on them. As you can see, this one here has like a little stem on it. It's maybe about a ½ inch long or something like that. It's a stem, and it's on a clear eye. And what I do is I made a block with little holes in it, basically 7, 8, 9 millimeter, which is generally the size of the eyes I use. And I stick the eye in there. It's kind of snug so the paint won't run all over the place when it goes in that hole. And I take an eyedropper, a regular eyedropper. You can even buy some paints that actually have these stoppers in them, the eyedroppers in them, mostly acrylic. I like to do the eyes with what's known as enamel, or the testers type enamel paints that you see for model cars. Enamel seems to be better. It stays on the glass better and it doesn't come off. Sometimes the acrylic comes off. And all you do is you dip into there, just come down, center that top right on the top of that thing and just drop it down. It'll run down the stem and it'll float around there and it'll just perfectly round itself out because the back of the thing has a little bit of a recess in it. So that's a good point if you want to do your own eyes. It's just a simple little tool that helps you out. When you talk about eyes, some of the old-time carvers used to not even put a glass eye in. They would just, carve out a wooden eye. And I've done that also. What I've taken is copper tubings, pieces of copper tubing like you see here, in different sizes. And I drilled a hole in the corks from wine bottles, poured some epoxy in, stuck the tubes in, and they helped me create an eye. Like for example, here's a head I'm starting to work on as far as carving out. So you can see there's an eye on that side, on there, on that block. And what I do is I take that tool and simply just take it and just rub it right in there, turn it around, and I've got my eye socket in there. And then they'll take a knife and just carve down a little bit so the eye ends up being a little above the regular side of the decoy. Now you got that wooden eye like in an old decoy. It also is a good guide if you just want to, dig it out and get your eye in there. You can actually go in with a chisel later or a little knife and just dig that out, or do what I call auger it out. Just take a tool and just keep working it out, or get a drill and just drill right in there and get it to the depth you want. But it's a good way to place an eye or even get an eye socket started by using a simple little tool like this. Another item that's handy is just a little miniature pair of pliers. Now, where would I use this? After I do those eyes, I got that stem on there. Can I leave it in when I put it in the decoy? Yeah, it'll stick to the wood putty and it'll help, but I like to cut them off. I just go right down there. There's like an edge on the one side that will literally take it up right above the, right above the glass itself, and just snip it off. Very handy little tool to work with. So those are just a couple of little points. One other one is I take a small, tiny little chisel, and what I do with that little chisel is I will sometimes start my nozzles on a decoy. I simply just take that little chisel. Now these are going to show you on the top because it's a pattern, but it actually would be on the side of the decoy, more like, over here on the side. And you just take that tool and you just stick it right in that hole, and you work it back and forth. And now what do you have? You have your cutouts for your nostrils. After I do that, a lot of times I will take what you call a nut picker. When you buy a walnut cracker, there's usually 2 or 3 little picks that come with it. They're perfectly teardrop shaped on the end. I take it, bend that tip over, stick that in there and work it around, and it will shape out to like a teardrop. So when you're looking at it, you'll see the teardrop effect on there. If I do it and it looks a little too big for me, I'm not happy with it, I fill it with wood putty. Let it set a little bit. Take that little pick that I have where I had bent the tip around, stick it in water so it won't stick to the wood putty, and just press it in. And as you press it in, it'll do the perfect teardrop form, and it will raise up on the edges. Like when you see a deep duck's nostrils, you kind of see like a little bit of a raised lip around the perimeter. And it just works out well, and it looks really neat. And it just looks good, and it's a way to do it with just a nut picker. I mean, you go to many old malls or antique stores and all, you'll find all these old things laying around for a couple of bucks a piece. They're like very inexpensive, and they work for you. They do a good job. So between just creating something with copper tubing and cork, sticking a small file into a cork, using different sized paint containers help you out. Using Forstner bits can help you out. There's all kinds of food containers you can buy out there, ones with separate compartments. This one has like 6 holes. This holds like deviled eggs, actually. So let's say you're going to be painting, you're going to be using 4 or 5 different colors. You can just pour them right out into these little slots, put that on your tabletop, and work from that. Because what you don't want to do is get paint on your table. It's hard to get off sometimes, it's just a mess. So you just do it in here, you just wipe it off with a damp rag when you're finished, clean it up, and that's the end of that. Another thing I've done that's just for my own edification is I got these little rubber mats that I use and I put on my tabletops. These are sample mats, which you can usually get in a rug store, any place that has a lot of sample mats. Ask them if they got any extra they're not using. They'd be glad to give them to you in most cases. I've got ones that have like a surface on one side, which is cloth, and the other side is just, plastic or rubber. This one's rubber on both sides. And it's nice because when you're working on a decoy, even if you're carving, you can kind of hold it down and just go like this. You're not holding it down on a wooden table. You're holding it down on something that's a little flexible. You can work it around. When you clean your brushes, you put a piece of rubber on there and you clean the paint off your brushes. The pebbled or rough surface that's on these mats helps clean the brush because it's a little bit of a rough surface. And again, that rough surface keeps the decoy body and all from moving around when you're trying to work on it. These are the little paint sticks I buy. They got a screw in the end. You go into like a hardware store, they sell these. They're like handles for like chisels or files or rasp. You go in, you just drill a little hole in there to get these, what they call two-way screws. They thread this way and they thread that way. You put epoxy in, thread it on down so it won't come out. You got this, stick it in the head or the body. I've got a bigger one for the body, which you can see over here. I'll get it out. It's just just a bigger one. See, it's just a little bigger than this one. And you hold that in the body. Very good when you're trying to paint. You can just hold it in your hand and do some painting. And again, all little things that are laying around and could be very useful to you when you're working on and doing your decoys.